Now on BBC One, Hugh Edwards with the BBC News at 10.
Tonight at 10, Labour's manifesto is unveiled, promising £48 billion worth of extra spending on public services. At the launch in Bradford, Jeremy Corbyn says Labour is proud of its blueprint for a better future and an end to government for the rich elite.
Our proposals are of hope for the many all over this country, and I'm very proud to present our manifesto for the many, not the few. Thank you very much.
Among Labour's plans is nationalising the water companies in England, along with rail and the Royal Mail. We'll be asking people in Bradford what they think of higher taxes to improve public services.
Absolutely agree with it. Seems that the rich are getting richer and the poor are just where they are.
You agree with Adam?
No.
Why not?
Because I'm in the higher tax bracket and I pay a lot of tax as it is.
We'll be looking at some claims that Labour's tax and spending figures lack credibility. Also tonight, President Trump denies that he shared highly sensitive US intelligence with the Russian foreign minister.
We had a very, very successful meeting with the foreign minister of Russia. Our fight is against ISIS.
Cost of living increased in April at the fastest rate in nearly 4 years, overtaking the rise in wages. Police say the search for the body of Keith Bennett will not end, despite the death of his killer, the Moors murderer Ian Brady.
And I'll be reporting from Jordan on a remarkable scientific venture that's bringing together countries you'd normally think of as enemies.
And coming up in Sports Day later in the hour on BBC News, it's a pivotal night in the Premier League as the race for a top four finish becomes a lot clearer.
Good evening. With just over 3 weeks to polling day, Labour has unveiled its manifesto. Jeremy Corbyn said Labour will build a better future for Britain, ending government for the rich and the elite. The manifesto includes pledges costing some £48.5 billion to be paid for in part by increasing taxes on business and higher earners. Labour wants to nationalise the railways, the water companies in England and Royal Mail. The party wants to scrap university tuition fees in England. It would reverse some of the cuts in welfare benefits and end the public sector pay freeze. And it would invest an extra £37 billion over 5 years in the NHS in England. But Labour's opponents said today that the figures were simply not credible. Our political editor, Laura Kunsberg, has more details.
Here it is. Labour's proposed contract with you. This would be his cabinet. This is Jeremy Corbyn's deal. A massive moment for the man who 2 years ago was a total outsider.
I am delighted to introduce the leader of the Labour Party and our next Prime Minister, Jeremy Corbyn.
A plan he believes the country needs.
Whatever your age or situation, people are under pressure, struggling to make ends meet. Our manifesto is for you.
Listing plenty of crowd pleasers here.
Labour will scrap tuition fees, lifting the debt. Labour is guaranteeing the triple lock to protect pensioners' incomes. And Labour will take our railways back into public ownership and put passengers first.
More childcare, more cash for the NHS too, paid for by the richest 5% and taxes on business, with nearly £50 billion of extra spending, paid for by nearly £50 billion of tax.
We're asking the better off and the big corporations to pay a little bit more. And of course, to stop dodging their tax obligations in the first place. This is a programme of hope. The Tory campaign, by contrast, is built on one word: fear.
For good or for ill, you think it's time to pay for your ideas, to tax more, to spend more, and to borrow more.
Do you know what? Every other country in the world says, why does Britain invest so little and pay itself so little while it allows such grotesque levels of inequality to get worse? Let's turn it round and do it the other way.
Do you think the public are going to go for something as radical as this?
I think those are earning over £80,000, paying a little bit more to pay for our health service and our children's education, I think that they'll be positive and supportive of it.
It's a fantastic manifesto.
The manifesto that you've got there, Laura, is full of really, really popular policies, and I am fighting hard, as is every Labour candidate, for a Labour victory, for a Labour government led by Jeremy Corbyn.
Do you really believe that he's up to the job now? Jeremy Corbyn is a leader who's had to fight to keep his job since he started, but broadly there's a manifesto built in his image. This is his radical offer to you.
The manifesto is the biggest hypothetical expansion of the state in many years. But how exactly would his ideas work?
Why in this manifesto is there no scale, no ballpark figure for how much it might cost the public purse? How much would you be prepared to borrow to renationalise 4 major industries?
We don't know what the share price will be at the time that we do it. So they've said in the case of rail there is a neutral cost on it. I believe in the case of water the same will apply in exchange for the bond issue.
On the other side of the equation, you haven't promised to reverse all the Tory welfare cuts. Now, for some of your supporters, do you accept that might be quite disappointing?
No, what I've said on the welfare cuts and cap issue is this, that we've set aside £2 billion to deal with the worst effects of the benefit cap, which will help a lot.
So you're not reversing the whole thing, but you are doing some questions.
You will see a lot of changes on it, but bear in mind we've had 2 weeks in order to prepare all of these policy issues because of the speed at which the election has been called. I accept the challenge. We've produced, I think, a very well thought out and very credible manifesto in a very short space of time.
Just one final question.
I think we deserve some credit for that, actually, but it's all right.
Well, it will be up to the voters, won't it?
Indeed, I look forward to their decision.
There's never been a question that he can pull a crowd. Rapture down the road in Huddersfield.
Right, we have liftoff.
But Jeremy Corbyn has 3 weeks to be heard across the board. Politics is not just who can shout the loudest. Laura Kunzberg, BBC News, Bradford.
As we heard there, Labour has said it will pay for its spending plans through a combination of extra borrowing and tax rises. At the same time, the manifesto commits the party to eliminating the deficit on day-to-day spending and to bringing down the amount of national debt by 2022. Our economics editor, Kamal Ahmed, has been looking in more detail at Labour's figures.
It's Labour's big offer to the voter. An extra £25.3 billion for education, that's enough to build 1,000 schools, £7.7 billion for the NHS, that's quite a few hospitals, and a £4 billion pay rise for the public sector. Add in other commitments on policing and the minimum wage, and the grand total of new spending, £48.6 billion.
The question Labour was asked today, how to pay for its promises. The bulk will come from new business taxes. Corporation tax will be increased from 19% up to 26%. Labour says that will raise nearly £20 billion, although forecasts can often be wrong. There will be a new levy on firms that pay employees over £330,000. Labour says that will raise £1.3 billion. And then there are the personal taxes. Those earning above £80,000 will pay a tax rate of 45 pence in the pound. If you earn above that amount, you could be worse off by up to £400 a year. For those earning £123,000, the rate rises to 50 pence. For those on the highest incomes, around £500,000, tax bills could increase by as much as £23,000. Now, some are sceptical that Labour's numbers add up.
In the end, raising tax does bring in more money, and if you put all of Labour's tax plans together, that would raise quite a significant amount of money. Not, I think, as much as they're hoping, because corporates, companies would change their behaviour, individuals would change their behaviour, but the scale of the changes is so big, there'd be some money for sure coming in.
Labour has also said it wants to borrow £25 billion more a year than the present government. That money, which will add to the national debt, will be spent on things like high-speed rail, broadband, renewable energy. But will that injection of new money really boost the economy?
With interest rates so low, there's a real opportunity to borrow at record low rates, which means you can pay it back, and it also means the Bank of England is not able to stimulate the economy as we would hope it would do. So right now, investment of this kind to get the economy moving, to build the roads, the infrastructure that we need, is really welcome.
It is a very different prospectus. More tax and spend, less balance the books. Labour has also said it wants to renationalise water companies, the railways and the Royal Mail, and costs are attached. If nothing else, the choice on June the 8th is certainly now a clear one. Kamal Ahmed, BBC News.
As we mentioned previously, Labour is promising to renationalise parts of 4 key industries: rail, electricity, Royal Mail and England's water companies if it wins power in June. Water was privatised by Margaret Thatcher back in 1989, and since then bills have risen by 40% above the rate of inflation. Our industry correspondent John Moylan has been assessing what a return to public ownership would mean for the water industry.
We all need water, but for busy households like the Phippen family near Southampton, that comes at a price. Despite attempts to cut back, their annual water bill has doubled in the past 3 years. So Labour's plan to shake up the industry received a cautious welcome.
Well, anything that can be done to bring the prices down of water, to make it a service rather than a for-profit offering, then we'll be for that.
State ownership is nothing new. Take a shower in Scotland or Northern Ireland when the water comes from a publicly owned firm. Turn on the tap in Wales and your water is from a not-for-profit company. But in England, the big water firms have been privately owned since the late 80s. It's these 9 English water and sewage companies with their reservoirs, their treatment works and their pumping stations that Labour now wants to bring back under public ownership. And it says that these big regional firms will no longer be paying dividends to shareholders, and that will help to reduce average household water bills by around £100 a year. Labour points to the rise in average household water bills since privatisation. They're up around 40%, although they have come down slightly in recent years. But would public ownership really make a difference?
They're already regulated very tightly by Ofwat. So by the state, the government taking them back under full ownership, the control you get is pretty marginal compared to what you have at the moment, and it's going to cost you many tens of billions of pounds to do so.
Once Britain's great industries were all state-owned, from the power sector to the railways, from Royal Mail to water. But the Thatcher years pioneered privatisation, selling state-owned assets to boost investment and efficiency. Critics pointed to huge profits and shareholder payouts too. Now Labour wants to see state ownership return to the railways, energy and the water sector. Sir Ian Byatt regulated the water industry for a decade after it was sold off.
And to the water customer.
He still backs private ownership, but believes changes are needed.
The dividends, I believe, are too high, and I believe that the prices are too high, and that the regulator should be pushing prices down.
The industry says it's invested £130 billion over the years to deliver better services, but unpicking decades of privatisation to deliver Labour's great vision won't be easy. John Moylan, BBC News.
Well, at today's manifesto launch in Bradford, Jeremy Corbyn said that Labour's manifesto was a programme of hope for Britain, representing a step change in British politics. But what do voters make of the emphasis on a bigger role for the state and higher taxation for business and higher earners? Our Deputy Political Editor, John Pienaar, has been talking to voters in Bradford.
No time to waste, enough selfies, time for Team Corbyn to spread the word.
Is this manifesto a vote winner, an election winner?
Yes, it is. It's proved to be extremely popular. Even when it was leaked, it was popular. Now they see the more detail, it'll be even more popular.
You guys, is it a winner? What do you think?
Of course it's a winner. Of course it's a winner. We're going to save the NHS. We're going to reverse the cuts to schools.
23 days, one purpose for these shadow ministers now: hit the road. Just a short jog from Labour's big launch in this Bradford gym club, it's clear Labour has ground to cover. Labour, under Jeremy Corbyn, what do you think?
Well, I quite like his policies, but I don't think they're doable.
Don't think they're doable. What do you think?
I agree, yeah, I don't think they're doable myself.
Why not?
I just don't think they are.
This is where the election's being decided, here, wherever millions of us make up our minds before June the 8th. Not many, maybe not enough of us comb through detailed policy, but voters will decide, should the state own and do more of what we need? Can the country afford it? Can we? And who do we trust? Labour has a lot of popular policies, but the party has a lot of people to persuade. Just ask around.
My name's Natalie.
And what do you do, Natalie?
I'm a personal trainer. I've just set up my own business.
Just set up your own business?
Yes.
So, look, today we're talking about taxes on businesses as well as better off people. What do you think about the idea of putting more tax on businesses so we've got more money for services?
I think it's okay for the bigger companies that can handle that, but smaller companies and new companies that are just starting out, obviously they need space and they need room to grow.
Have you decided who to vote for?
No, not yet. I'm still indecisive about it. I'm still weighing up.
You're a police officer? Okay. So look, I'm going to ask you then, what do you think about the idea, Labour idea, Jeremy Corbyn promise, to tax the better off more?
Absolutely agree with it. Seems that the rich are getting richer and the poor are just where they are. It's getting harder and harder for the poor to obviously find jobs and provide a living for their loved ones.
Okay, do you agree with Adam?
No.
Why not?
Because I'm in the higher tax bracket and I pay a lot of tax as it is. I don't think it's fair for people who's doing well, making all the money, to get taxed even more.
Are you being selfish because our services are short of money, we need more money?
I'm sure that they can do cutbacks on other things.
Labour's challenge under Jeremy Corbyn is to convince the unconvinced, to ditch the centre ground policies that helped Tony Blair conquer Middle Britain and win 3 times and win his way. It doesn't look easy, that's because it's hard, very hard. John Pienaar, BBC News, Bradford.
Well, let's go live to Bradford tonight, and our political editor, Laura Kuensberg, is there. Laura, can we talk about the nature of the choice that Labour has offered voters today?
Well, Hugh, manifesto moments are those times in any election campaign when voters sometimes think it's now that I'm going to sit up and listen. And what they would have heard from Jeremy Corbyn today was a very clear choice, a very clear distinction between him and what the Tories are putting on the table. His 21st century brand of old Labour, if you like. More tax, more spending, and yes, some more borrowing, but to spend on the things in this country that he believes voters really need and that voters really want. Now, the question, of course, is how many people will believe him when he makes that offer? How many people will find that appealing when it is a real departure from the direction that the Labour Party has been travelling in recent years, when it is a departure from the consensus, if you like, of what has been the stable centre, some people might call it, in British politics for quite some time. Now, in his view, the irritations, the anger and the anxiety of Britain in 2017 do mean that voters are ripe and ready for something that sounds very, very different. And he said to me today, when he goes around the place, he's hugely encouraged and hugely infused by the crowds that seem to greet him almost wherever he goes. But there is a gamble in all of this, of course. Crowds on the campaign stump don't necessarily translate into huge votes at the ballot box. And remember, not so long ago in 2015, Ed Miliband made a few little tiptoes to the left of where Labour had been, and he lost that election. Jeremy Corbyn is making a much bigger step in the same direction. It is a gamble as whether or not the voters of Middle England are really ready for the policies that he believes will be popular. And if you needed a reminder of just how big the challenge that he may face will be, one of his biggest supporters, Len McCluskey, the boss of Unite Union, suggested to a website tonight it would be extraordinary if Labour was able to do it.
Laura, thank you very much again. Laura Kuenssberg there with the latest on the Labour manifesto launch in Bradford. Some more election news, because in Wales, Plaid Cymru has launched its manifesto, telling voters that Wales badly needs a strong voice during the Brexit process to protect Welsh industry and agriculture. The party leader, Leanne Wood, said that she wanted to ensure that Wales would continue to trade with Europe without costly barriers. Policies include scrapping business rates, creating a publicly owned bank and retaining the triple lock on pensions. Some more of the day's other news now then, and President Trump has been accused of sharing classified information with the Russians during a meeting at the Oval Office last week. The White House has responded by saying it was wholly appropriate for the president to share information about the threat from the Islamic State group with the Russian foreign minister and the ambassador. But both Republicans and Democrats have expressed concern that secret material was shared with Moscow, said to be highly sensitive intelligence provided by one of America's allies. Let's join our North America editor John Sopel in Washington for the latest.
Hugh, this has been another bumpy 24 hours for the White House, with mixed messages and seemingly a new chapter opened in the Russia saga. Tonight it's being reported that the source of that highly delicate intelligence was the Israelis, although no confirmation of that. But this weekend, the president will fly to the Middle East. And he won't be the first president that hopes that a major overseas trip will divert attention away from his problems at home. This meeting with the Russian foreign minister and ambassador was already controversial enough, coming a day after the sacking of the FBI director, who'd been investigating the Trump campaign's links to Moscow. Now it's being claimed that during the meeting, the president shared the most highly classified information with his guests, so sensitive that America's allies like Britain knew nothing about it. As the White House once again scrambled to put out the fire, the National Security Advisor last night emerged to say the story was nonsense.
At no time were intelligence sources or methods discussed, and the president did not disclose any military operations that were not already publicly known. And I was in the room, it didn't happen.
But then on Twitter this morning from the president, a different story. Yes, it did, and so what? He wrote, "As president, I wanted to share with Russia, at an openly scheduled White House meeting, which I have the absolute right to do, facts pertaining to terrorism and airline flight safety." So once again, the general was sent out to face the guns and explain the change of story.
What the president discussed with the foreign minister was wholly appropriate to that conversation and is consistent with the routine sharing of information between the president and any leaders with whom he's engaged.
And the president was sticking to generalities today.
We had a very, very successful meeting with the foreign minister of Russia. Our fight is against ISIS. As General McMaster said, I thought he said, and I know he feels, that we had actually a great meeting.
On Capitol Hill, the only reaction has been fury from Democrats and from Republicans willing to talk, a certain exasperation and weariness.
I think we could do with a little less drama from the White House on a lot of things so that we can focus on our agenda.
Another influential Republican said the White House seemed to be in a downward spiral. The president is frustrated, but it's hard to see what's going to change. The abnormal is becoming normal. John Sopel, BBC News, Washington.
The rate of inflation rose last month to its highest since September of 2013. The Office for National Statistics says that prices, as measured by the Consumer Price Index, were 2.7% higher in April than the year before, and it means that the cost of living is now rising faster than wages. Let's talk to our economics correspondent, Andy Verity. And Andy, for proof, really, evidence that people visiting the shops are already feeling this.
Yeah, if you go down to the shops tomorrow, Hugh, you're probably already used to the odd unpleasant surprise. The price of fish, for example, is up by 8%. If you want to buy a book, that's up by 7%. The energy to heat the shop you go to, up by 6%. And if you take a bus to get there, that's a rise of 10% in passenger transport by road. So some prices are going down, of course. Toys and games, for example. The price of petrol took a dip over the month. But on average, prices rose on the official measure by 2.7%. Now, you compare that with the average pay rise, which was only at the last count 2.2%. And you can see quite clearly there that wages aren't keeping up with prices. Now, we'll have a further update on that tomorrow. We had this before. We've been here before. It looks familiar. The big squeeze on living standards between 2011 and 2014. Now, that relaxed for the last 2.5 years, but now it's tightened again. One consolation is that it's precisely because the Bank of England doesn't think wages are going up to beat inflation, that it's not that worried about inflation becoming permanent. It thinks it's only temporary, so no big rises in interest rates anytime soon.
OK, Andy, again, thanks very much. Andy Verity there for us. Now, 9 years after it was rescued by the state during the financial crisis, Lloyds Banking Group is returning to private ownership. The government has sold its remaining shares in Lloyds, ending one of the biggest bailouts of the crisis. At one point, 43% of the company was state-owned. The reprivatisation of Lloyds is expected to be officially announced tomorrow. Greater Manchester Police say that the death of the Moors murderer Ian Brady will not stop them looking for the remains of 12-year-old Keith Bennett, the only one of his victims whose body was never found. Brady and his partner Myra Hindley abducted Keith back in 1964 and refused to say where he was buried. Brady was jailed in 1966 for the murder of 3 children and later admitted to another 2 killings. He died yesterday at the age of 79. Our correspondent Judith Moritz has this report.
His name will always be notorious, his face the image of evil. Ian Brady, the Moors murderer. He took children and tortured them and brought their bodies high up to the hills above Manchester. On the desolate moors, the police spent years searching for their remains. Brady's accomplice was his girlfriend, Myra Hindley. She died 15 years ago. Brady's death closes a chapter of criminal history. 5 children died at their hands. The youngest, Leslie Ann Downey, was just 10 years old. Her family are still grieving.
I remember when I sat on the stairs in Attersley and my mum had to go to identify Leslie. She come through the door and she just nodded. You know, and it still gets me now.
At their trial, the pair were met with public jeers. Sentenced to life, Brady was at first taken to prison, but in 1985 he was transferred to Ashworth, a high-security hospital. From there he wrote letters. In one he claimed to feel remorse, but he showed no sympathy to the family of 12-year-old Keith Bennett, whose remains were never located. It consumed the life of his mother Winnie, who died without knowing where he lay.
The police say that virtually every week someone gets in touch purporting to be able to lead them to Keith, but they're not actively searching the moors at the moment. They say, though, that they'll never close the case, and Ian Brady's death doesn't change that.
Yesterday, knowing his death was imminent, Brady called his solicitor to see him.
I don't think there was anything he really knew or had any information that would assist in the location of Keith Bennett's body.
Did Brady say anything which would give the families of the victims any comfort?
No.
Today, a coroner said that Brady's ashes must not be scattered across these moors. Bad enough that he's taken his Saddleworth secret to the grave, controlling and cruel to the last. Judith Moritz, BBC News.
A man who was arrested on suspicion of conspiracy to murder a female police officer outside the Libyan embassy in London back in 1984 has been told he will not face charges. Scotland Yard said that key material in the case of PC Yvonne Fletcher couldn't be used in court on grounds of national security. Some more on the election campaign, and one of the key battlegrounds in next month's vote is London, which accounts for more than 10% of all members of Parliament and contains more than a dozen closely contested marginal constituencies. The city, because of its rapid economic growth and complex social problems in some areas, presents politicians with a unique set of challenges, as our chief correspondent Gavin Hewitt explains.
London, a fast-charging global city. A place apart from the rest of the UK. Even the politics are different, registering some of the strongest support for remaining in the EU. But running through London is a fault line between those living well off the global economy and those left behind. Take housing.
London average house price is coming in at £475,000. That's twice the UK average. If you look at the statistics...
Lucian Cook from the property group Savills sees a great divide.
If you look at what's happened in London, it's dislocated itself from the rest of the UK for a prolonged period, and that means London faces a series of housing challenges that are more acute than the UK. It's about building enough housing stock. If you look at London, particularly in the lower tiers of the market, we're not building nearly enough housing stock.
Along the river are new developments where half the flats are foreign-owned. It is a city of extraordinary wealth, with public sector workers squeezed over places to live. Amina Ahmed works in the NHS as a paediatric nurse. She lives with her 4 children in a 1-bedroom flat in South London.
You do get demotivated sometimes, you get angry, you get frustrated, because obviously, having to work 12 hours and then coming home and not to even have your a space to rest from the shift. Even some of my colleagues that are sort of nurses, midwives, they can't really afford to live and work in London at the same time.
London's public sector has many similar stories. Around half the Met's police officers that patrol the capital live outside the city. There are just so many ways that this city is different from the rest of the UK. 2 million out of London's 5 million workforce were born abroad. Immigration is part of this city's identity and part of its lifeblood. Take this luxury hotel in Leicester Square. It is totally dependent on workers from abroad.
Where are you from?
I'm from Romania.
I'm from Spain.
So where are you from? I'm Italian.
I'm from India. From Barcelona, Spain.
London is a melting pot. Its flexible labour market a magnet for young workers.
Across our business, we employ approximately 2,300 people, so it's probably fair to say that more than 50% of those employees are from the EU.
And from the rest of the world altogether?
So in total, probably around 80% we're looking at.
The question that London asks the politicians, if migration is reduced, where will the capital draw its workforce from? The commuters flowing over London Bridge support a financial sector employing 750,000 people. The city provides nearly 12% of the UK's tax receipts. The Brexit negotiations hang over the city, with some banks making plans to move part of their operations to elsewhere in Europe.
Uncertainty is what's causing city firms to continue to build out their contingency plans. And the longer that those plans are worked through in the fine detail, the more likely that they'll be put into action.
London is the indispensable city, and at election time it provokes different choices. The city's inequalities boost the Labour vote. The prospect of a hard Brexit troubles many of those who voted Remain. A city that depends on outsiders is less concerned with immigration. Others look to the Tories to deliver global Britain. London, a capital with its own priorities. Gavin Hewitt, BBC News, London.
In Birmingham today, a large bomb from the Second World War has been safely detonated. Images taken by police show how the explosion was controlled using several tons of sand. The discovery of the bomb has caused days of traffic problems in and around the city. Scientists from different parts of the Middle East, including Iranians, Israelis and Palestinians, have been meeting in Jordan for the opening of a new international research centre. The Sesame Project is designed to encourage collaboration between countries in the region, whether or not they have stable diplomatic relations. As our science editor, David Schuckman, found out.
In the dusty hills of Jordan, a gleaming new research centre many thought would never happen. The Sesame Project brings together scientists from countries you'd normally think of as enemies. And today they were celebrating the opening of the new laboratory to be shared by the Middle East.
It's an uneasy happiness because I know how fragile it is, but I still would like to enjoy the moment.
And you think it's going to survive?
It's going to survive.
Inside is a giant machine called a synchrotron. It acts like a powerful microscope. Particles are fired at high speed around a circular track, generating intense beams of light that reveal incredible detail with lots of uses. It can study plants in a totally new way, investigate ancient manuscripts like the Dead Sea Scrolls, and help fight cancer Jihan Kamel says the new synchrotron will transform the search for tumours.
You can see everything you want. You can even see things that were beyond your imagination.
What's remarkable is that this project has been built with the help of countries that sometimes don't have diplomatic relations or are hostile to each other. Yet, now that it's open, you're going to get Iranian, Palestinian, Israeli scientists all coming here to do their research together.
I am very proud to see that this is happening. This is the biggest scientific event in the region. And Iran is supporting this project fully.
This is not going to bring peace to the Middle East, but it's going to show people that they can work together for a common cause. And in that sense, we are a light, a small flashlight in the region.
An Israeli scientist close to a group of Iranians. Somehow they do get along. Well, beyond these walls, the Middle East remains as volatile as ever. David Shukman, BBC News in Jordan.
David Shukman there with the Sesame Project. That's it. Here on BBC One, it's time for the news where you are. Have a good night.